important issue, the question of religions of the world. That is, the Muslim mind had an image of religion in a world global setting even before modern times, in contrast to many other religions. And there was an awareness among Muslim intellectuals, those who thought about these subjects, about the question of religions of the world. That's the very term itself, religions of the world. To this was added the fact that Islam believed that it was the last religion, but not the only religion. And in fact, I've said so many times, Islam refers to even earlier religions as being Islam, that is submission to God. And two of the most important figures of the pre-Islamic family of Abrahamic religions, that is Abraham and Christ, are referred to in the Quran as Muslim. Kana Ibrahim Musliman Hanifan, the Quran says. Verily, Abraham was a Muslim, and he was a primordialist, he was a Hanif. So the identification of Islam with global, expound this, spread it, make its understanding more prevalent, and a vast literature was developed on the basis of the Sufi view of the universality of religion. We see this especially in Persian poetry. If you read the poetry of Hafez, whom I consider to be the greatest of all Persian poets, who was also a Sufi poet, or those of Maulana Jalaluddin Rumi, so well known as certainly the greatest Sufi poet from the point of view of the doctrines that he ever expressed, if not the language, where people think Hafez's language is more delicate, you might say. But in any case, there's no doubt that in these writings, there are numerous references to other religions, to the extent that many people who do not have a deep understanding have said, oh, Hafiz was not a Muslim because he referred to the fiery temples of the Zoroastrians and so forth and so on. This, of course, is total nonsense. This is an expression of the inner teaching of religions, which Sufism was always seeking and upon which it was based. And there are some very beautiful poems and debates about this in the 19th century. Hatif Asfahani, Hatif, Hatif, a very important poet, Sufi poet of the 19th century, has a beautiful poem in which he's having a debate with a Christian about Trinity and unity. And as they're debating this issue, suddenly the bell of the church, the mosques never had bells, the bell was always associated with the Islamic world of the church, suddenly began to ring. And what did it ring? که یکی هست و هیچ نیست جز او وحده لا اله الا هو. For there is one and there is none but he. And then in Arabic, وحده, he is one, لا إله إلا هو, there is no God but he. So this is a very deep issue which the Muslims were aware of, and it played a very important role in Islam's understanding, in Sufism's view, in Islam's understanding of other religions over the ages. One could write volumes and volumes about this. Finally, the discourse I'm giving you, I want to speak about instances of direct contact between Sufism and other religions, which left an effect most of the other religions. Occasionally, for example, in India, the Naqshbandi order was influenced by certain Hindu practice of breathing. It was the other way around. But most of the time, the influence can be seen of Sufism on other religions of the world. Let me start with the Abrahamic. The root of the Kabbalah, of course, is in Jewish esotericism. But why is there suddenly this flowering of the Kabbalah after the Islamic period? And within the Islamic world, it later on spread to Europe. Within the Islamic world, the very deep nexus between the development of the Kabbalah and the presence of Sufis. Then you have Christian mysticism of the East, which goes back to Christ, goes back to Christic teachings and initiation and everything like that. All authentic mysticism goes back to the revelation. Otherwise, it's not authentic from our point of view. But why is it that it's so well preserved in those lands which were for 500 years colonies of the Muslim Ottoman Empire? Why is it that the seat of Christian mysticism is on Mount Athos to this day in Greece, which was 500 years, was a Turkish colony, and any Turkish general could have ordered the monastery of Mount Athos to be torn down in one day, but it didn't. It was kept, it was preserved, and Christian mysticism survived, and there are a lot of very interesting even practices of Orthodox Christians which are very similar to those of Islam. Of course, Western Orientalists say that because of the influence of Christianity on Islam and the origin of Sufism goes back to Christian influence on Islam. Of course, we in the Islamic world do not accept that at all. In the same way that we accept the relevancy of Christian mysticism because it goes back to Christ, we believe that Sufism, which is Islamic esotericism, goes back to the Islamic revelation, to the Quran and the Prophet, obviously. But anyway, you had these examples in the Abrahamic world, and then you had these remarkable examples in India, where there was an exchange between Sufism and Hinduism, which is still a very much living tradition, and where the esoteric metaphysical aspects were much better preserved than in Western Christianity in modern times, from the time of the Renaissance on, and the Middle Ages on. And during this period, there were remarkable influences of Sufism on certain aspects of Hinduism. They say even the later Bhakti movements in India, Orthodox Hindu Bhakti mystical movements, were influenced by Sufism sometimes. There are many Hindus who wrote in Persian. The Sufi writings were known in many Hindu circles. Many Hindus read the Masnavi of Jalaluddin Rumi. The book, a definitive book really, on this incredible action and reaction and interaction between Sufism or Islam in general, but especially its esoteric aspect, Sufism, and the inner dimensions of Hinduism in India has not yet been written, but all these books have been written. But there's so many diverse elements. You can just take Kashmir, just one province, and you can write 100 books about that, about this subject. And other places, Uttar Pradesh, Bengal, all over the Indian world, you have this interaction, which is extremely remarkable. Then you have China. In China, which was exposed to Islam in the time of the Prophet, when a boat from Arabia crossed the Indian Ocean and went up the coast of China and landed in earliest Muslims settled in Nanking. They've been there for 1400 years. The Muslims did not use Chinese for the Quran and spiritual teachings. But very soon, they began to incorporate these teachings into Chinese Islamic mystical thought, you might say. Many Sufi orders are spread in among Muslim China. And what are the books? The first Muslim books translated into Chinese, there were Azizuddin Nasafi, a famous Sufi. So Sufism was the origin of the spread, really, of the inner teachings of Islam in China. And then later on, of course, after the 17th century, Chinese scholars who had been trained in classical Chinese studies, like Wang Yu, began to write about Sufism in Chinese. And there's a lot of relationship between Sufism and or Persian Sufism especially, and Chinese inner philosophical mystical teachings, some of which, thanks to the efforts of Sachka Murata and a few others, William Chittick, her husband, we've been working together on this, and a few other Chinese scholars, is now becoming known more and more, is entering the scholarly world, but again, a vast world. And then there are places that we don't even talk about, for example, the influence of Sufism among the northern tribes of Asia, among various African cultures, and the products that came out of very important works in Nigeria, Senegal, all those places, of which unfortunately the main center of Islamic world and Western scholarship is not fully aware. African studies have somehow been separated from Islamic studies in most places, and it's time now to bring these things together. Anyway, altogether, Sufism has had a very important role as far as world religions are concerned, and its final role has been in our own times, when many people in the West who have become tired of this secularism and atheism and materialism of the West have turned east. Most of them went to India, became interested in pseudo-Hinduism or serious Hinduism, Buddhism, but then gradually more and more people approach are important in reviving actually intellectual and spiritual aspects of these other Abrahamic religions. And so Sufism remains very much alive, and paradoxically, most people who become interested in Islam outside become interested in Islam because of Sufism. Islam has, by mistake, been called the religion of the sword. It's absurd. No religion can spread but the sword. But anyway, there were early Islamic conquests, but many Christians remained. They remained to this day in Syria and Iraq. They were all forced to become Muslims. What are these Christian Arabs doing? It was a slow process, and the rest of the spread of Islam was not through the sword, but through Sufi orders, or through Sufism. And so this interaction between Sufism and Western religions is itself a new phase of a long history. In any case, whoever becomes interested in the future of the Islamic world and on the dynamics of what is going on in the Islamic world today in a deeper sense, cannot remain impervious to the importance of Sufism and its teachings. We live at a time when there's a tremendous amount of interest in Sufism globally, a lot of pseudo writings, a lot of shallow writings, a lot of distortions, which also characterize our times. There's so much pseudo-mysticism. Hinduism, Christianity, the Kabbalah, all the different mystical traditions of the world are also diluted and distorted by various forms of modernism, which is one of the characteristics of our times. But despite all of that, authentic Sufism continues, and in fact, it is becoming more and more rooted even in the West, as well as still surviving even in communist China and Hindu India, which now with the BJP is very much against Islam, but it's surviving in those lands, and it's not going to go away. It's one of the most important heritages of Islam, and even within the Islamic world, despite the rise of the Salafi, sort of fundamentalist movement, and of modernism, both of which are against Sufism, Sufism remains strong in most Islamic countries, and in fact began to receive a revival from the 1950s onward, which still goes on. I wish the rest of this conference well, and I pray that it will bear fruit for everyone. Thank you very much.